Hey there, sexy techies.
Hey, everybody. So, this is going to be a little bit different of an episode. It's probably going to be a difficult episode for us to record. So this episode airs on the 5-year anniversary of the worst day of our lives.
Pretty much.
And actually, we didn't intend to do this episode. We had another topic planned for this week about how to get ideas for startups, which we'll do sometime in the coming weeks. But I woke up in the middle of the night last night with an idea. I often wake up in the middle of the night. And in the morning, I pitched it to May, and I said, we need to do an episode about Aaron.
And I was like, I think that's perfect. I was 175% on board with that.
So for those of you who don't know me or our family, Aaron was my twin brother. And I guess, so for those of you thinking, like, I thought this was a show about startups.
We'll get there.
It is, yes. I promise we'll get there in a couple different ways in this episode, but there's some backstory we have to tell to sort of set the stage. So I mentioned Aaron was my twin brother. We were very close throughout our lives growing up.
As most twins are.
as most, yes. From the get-go, really. We were right on top of each other, literally, in the womb. But we were also very different from one another. Sports came pretty naturally to Aaron. He was a very gifted athlete. One example is, even without practicing nearly as hard as any of the other kids, Aaron was the fastest kid in our entire city in cross country. There was the other kid who, was his challenger, basically. You could tell, like, he gave it his all in practice every day, which was great for him. Aaron didn't need to do that, and he beat him anyway.
I know. I feel like if you Google Aaron's name, you can see a lot of his race times.
Yeah, you still can. You can see mine too. So, I was more of average athleticism. School came more naturally to me.
There you go. There you go.
So, Aaron excelled at, like, basically everything sports related: basketball, track, football. He even played lacrosse in college. When we were little, we used to play soldiers, like most kids do. Probably more boys, I would say, than girls.
Yeah,
but
I did not play soldiers.
Yeah, you didn't? Oh, okay. You and your sister didn't play soldiers?
We played Mary Poppins. Go on.
Okay. Except at our house, it was a little bit different. Aaron was a soldier, and I was the president that Aaron was protecting.
Oh.
So, yeah, I mean, that's just kind of...
If that says anything about your dynamic.
The way that we were.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the other kids, like my other brother, Matt, and some of the other kids in the neighborhood, too, they were soldiers or Secret Service or something. I don't know how I got to be the president, but I thought it was pretty cool. So when we were graduating high school and sort of deciding what to do next in life, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to Georgetown. It was my number one choice for college, and fortunately I got in, and that's what I did. Aaron, he wasn't as sure about what he wanted to do. He actually kind of wanted to join the Army. We graduated high school in 2003, so the Iraq War was just getting underway.
Right.
And through some light guidance from my dad, my parents, Aaron decided to go to college first. He's kind of decided he'll put off the whole Army thing. And, if that's still in the cards down the line, maybe he would, do it then.
Yeah.
So Aaron went to college. He went to the University of South Florida in Tampa, which is where May and I live now. And, I'd say he enjoyed his time in college.
Yeah, from the stories I heard, yep, I agree. Go Bulls.
Yeah. So, I mean, same from what the time that we spent with him when he was in college, when we were in college, from the stories that we heard, he probably enjoyed it more than most. So I don't think he had any regrets about that decision. He graduated in 2008 with a degree in criminal justice. And over the next 8 or 9 years, he had a few different jobs.
Oh, yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of remember some of them.
Yeah. So he worked in insulation at like a family insulation business for a few years.
Up in Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts,
where they need insulation.
Yeah. Well, we need it here too, just for
Yeah,
to keep the cold in instead of to keep
different weather.
the heat
Yeah.
in. He enjoyed that. But it wasn't. He didn't feel fulfilled by any of the jobs or the career paths that he was going down.
I feel like a lot of people's first jobs out of college, like, they don't always feel completely fulfilled. It's not like their dream job necessarily. Some do, and they're very lucky, but most don't.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that. But he tried a few different jobs. He moved to Florida to be closer to our brother Matt and me and some other family down here in, I think it was like 2013 or 14. 2014 maybe.
Yeah. It was maybe like a year or so after we bought our house.
Yeah. And then he down here he worked in office job, which, he decided to give it a try. I think nobody ever thought that would be Aaron's thing, and he learned pretty quickly that it wasn't.
Yeah, but bless his heart for trying.
And so in the spring of 2017, I remember the day pretty clearly. Aaron and I were playing golf. I remember what course we were on. Mm-hmm. I remember what hole we were on. I remember that I sliced my drive to the right, which I usually do, so that one wasn't as hard. Right. But we were out on the right rough of this hole at Northdale Country Club, and I could tell Aaron was a little nervous, but he told me he was going to join the Army. And I didn't really try and talk him out of it, too much. Right. There might have been a little bit of that, but I didn't know that I necessarily wanted him to. I knew that he wasn't happy with what he was doing. And I knew it was something that was sort of in the back of his mind for a long time.
Right.
And at this point we were 32 years old, and he said, I think he said you had to be under 35 to enlist in the Army.
Ooh, cutting it close.
So he didn't have too much longer.
Yeah.
And I just knew things would be different at that point. Like, best case scenario, he'd be gone for 4 years. Best case scenario for me, selfishly, right? Like
course,
he'd be gone for 4 years.
Your brother, your friend,
yeah. Worst case scenario. There's a few different worst case scenarios, but one of the worst case scenarios is from me as a selfish twin brother that he makes a career out of it and ends up living in Alaska or Guam or something.
Yeah.
And, we never see each other. It played out a little differently than that. But so Aaron enlisted in the Army in August of 2017 and shipped off to boot camp at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. He decided to be a combat medic. Mm-hmm. What did you think of that choice when Aaron decided to be a combat medic? Did you know? So I don't know if you knew, but biology was one of the subjects that he was actually always interested in high school. Was one of the subjects he excelled in. So I was actually not too surprised at that. I thought it was a good decision for him.
Yeah, I never knew that he was into the sciences. Just because there were 1,000,007 other things that we talked about. It was never science or biomedics or anything. But his wife at the time was a nurse, and so I know that she was also very encouraging of helping him study and all of that. So I think it was a good path for him. I just I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know what I was expecting actually. Maybe something more hands-on engineering. I don't know.
Well, he did later have ambitions of maybe getting into special forces, that sort of stuff. So, but I was very proud of the path that Aaron chose.
Yeah, I agree.
I remember when he graduated from boot camp, my parents went to the ceremony. He met some great friends in the Army too.
Amazing friends. Yeah.
One that we're still good friends with today. So
yeah, and even just being able to write to him while he was in boot camp, and I've never really had somebody that near and dear to me go through that. I know you have a lot of military, people in your family that have gone to boot camp and, served overseas and everything. But he was really like one of the first like family that I had where we can experience like writing to him, hearing what his day-to-day was like there. We had a 2-year-old at the time, and he was really curious about like what his Uncle Aaron does in the Army and things like that. Yeah, it was really great to hear all that he was able to accomplish. He was definitely seen as a leader from what I've heard, and what he writes about. So it was really cool to see him grow.
Yeah, that was one of the funny things too about Aaron joining the Army. So he was 32 when he enlisted. Most of the other soldiers in the Army with him at the time were in the 18 to 20 range, probably. So Aaron would talk about that. They definitely looked up to him as a leader just because of his age and maturity. But Aaron, it was funny reading when Aaron wrote us letters and then talking to him like when he was home on breaks, when he came to visit and stuff like that. Just that the way he talked about the younger kids, because like that was him when he was that age.
Him. Yeah, he'd be like, these knuckleheads would do X, Y, Z.
Get us in trouble. Yeah. We have to do push-ups and all this stuff. And it's like, that's karma, man. Yeah. So about a little more than a year after he enlisted, so in November 2018, Aaron was working to get his expert field medical badge in the Army, which involved a few weeks of sleeping in a tent, completing a bunch of written and physical exams and exercises, and just another example of how different we are in some ways. I was building a startup at the time. So actually exactly 1 week after I got into Y Combinator, Aaron was scheduled to finish up the expert field medical badge with a 12-mile ruck. If you don't know what a ruck is, it's basically a course where the soldiers have to carry a heavy pack over rough terrain through, this one was 12 miles, and it was the conclusion of this whole badge process that he was going through.
It sounded like a really intense process, not just the ruck itself, but everything leading up to it.
Yeah.
I remember they also took lots of like video of him doing a lot of like the trainings and the courses and stuff. And just seeing little snippets of that, I couldn't even do those little snippets without being out of breath. But he's a really fit guy. So
yeah, no, he was very fit. Actually, even though he was in his 30s, he in basic training, he actually won the physical fitness award.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Competing against all these 20-year-olds and such. So
it's a little boost to your ego.
Yeah, he was in good shape.
Yeah.
He trained pretty hard. I think, going into it, he knew he was going to be at a disadvantage because of his age. Not that he was old, but, for the Army, he was, to enlist in the Army, he was old.
I bet that was like the kick that he needed to be like, nah, I'm not going to let that.
Yeah. Oh, he didn't like to lose.
Oh, yeah. Anything, an argument, game night.
So, I mentioned November 8th. He actually texted me the night before. He made it a lot farther than he thought he would in the process. I remember him saying, it's only a matter of time till I go home. So the way that it works is like you get eliminated at all these different stages. So like if you don't score enough points on the written exam, you go home. Like to make too many mistakes in these different exercises that they do, you go home. So he figured it was only a matter of time till he got sent home. And I remember, I think the day before the ruck, he had to take a written exam. Yeah. And he didn't, I don't think he thought he was going to pass it. And that night I asked him, and he said, just have the ruck left. So
that's awesome. Yeah.
I don't often drink beer when we do these podcasts, but
Little
I needed one tonight.
liquid encouragement. Yeah.
So the morning of November 8th, I got a call from my dad. And he said he had gotten a call from the Army, and Aaron had been involved in some sort of incident or accident near the end of the ruck. And he had lost he lost consciousness and hadn't gained it back yet. At the time, he was being treated at an Army hospital near what was then Fort Bragg, and he was being transferred to the Duke University Medical Center. So I think we knew it was, I think we knew it was something heart-related at the time. I don't really remember exactly how much detail we knew at the time. But, so I was living in Florida, and so was my brother Matt. And I called him, and he came and picked me up, and we drove to Duke.
That day, yeah, I remember.
And I think we made it in record time, actually, because the last hour or so, we were actually behind the ambulance.
Oh, yeah.
That we later found out
You could.
that Aaron was in.
Yeah.
And so he was being transported from whatever hospital he was at before Duke.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up following it for like the last hour of our drive. I don't know what time they left there, but we made it pretty fast from Florida.
Yeah.
So when we got to Duke, we learned that Aaron had suffered a massive heart attack in his left anterior descending artery, the LAD artery. It's also commonly referred to as the widowmaker.
Yeah, I just learned that term that year.
Because of this?
Because of
this, okay. Yeah, I didn't know much about. I had heard it before. I didn't know anything about it. I did a little bit of research. It's not the best place to have a heart attack.
It's like the worst, right?
Yeah, something like only about 6% of people who have a heart attack in that artery outside of the hospital survive.
Oh, wow.
Aaron was hooked up to all these machines when we got there. He was on an ECMO machine to pump his blood and oxygenate his blood outside of his body and pump it back in while we were, when we got there. And, they were trying to just get him as much oxygenated blood as he could. At the time, they didn't know how long he was without oxygen from this heart attack. And so, they did what they could to keep him alive while they diagnosed, his brain activity, basically,
right.
whether there was brain activity left.
Right. And at this point, he was still unconscious and pretty much kept alive on machines at this point.
Yeah. We had May said this earlier, we had he was 2 at the time, I think, a 2-year-old. And so May actually traveled up and back twice during this time period. So I knew this was going to be difficult, but I didn't think it was going to be this difficult. 4 days later, on November 12th, 2018, Aaron died. As May mentioned, he never regained consciousness from the heart attack and the subsequent injuries to his organs, and that he suffered from the heart attack. He went too long without oxygen, as it turned out. And over the following weeks, months, and even years, we learned more about what happened, really, from both from official Army records and reports, and from other information that we pieced together from conversations with other soldiers that were there and friends who were with them at the time or who were just in the Army at the time. So it was around mile 10 or 11 of the 12-mile ruck that Aaron suffered the heart attack. And I actually spoke with I've spoken with the two soldiers who ran with him, and the one of them was with him the entire time, even after the heart attack. He said Aaron was doing great up to that point. He was tired. He was exhausted from like the weeks that they were out there in the field, and he was ready to get home, but he said he had no doubt that Aaron was going to finish the race. And so when Aaron had the heart attack, so this was for the expert field medical badge. So it was for medical personnel in the Army. So they had plenty of medics around. There was one, I think, less than 50 yards from where Aaron collapsed. And so they got to him very fast, fortunately. They started doing CPR almost immediately, way faster than 99% of people who would have this type of event, elsewhere. Probably within a minute.
Yeah.
So, and they had plenty of those people. I mean, they called, they radioed, they got more help. They cycled through when one person got tired, they moved on to the next person. But what I found out was they had an ambulance or multiple ambulances on the grounds for this event, but because of the terrain and the fact that it had rained a lot in the days prior to the event, the terrain was very wet. It took maybe as much as 20 minutes or more for an ambulance to actually arrive on the scene. And when it did arrive, it was stuck and they couldn't get it out. Mm-hmm. And so they had to call for a civilian ambulance from one of the local hospitals to come get him. And this was on an army post. So there was an army fence, which they had to get permission from the army to cut down so they could get in and get him out. And, these sorts of delays are very costly in this type of event. I will mention, this information wasn't in the Army report. I literally found this out a few months ago in conversations with other soldiers. So, and then, we learned more from the autopsy, and this was, probably the most surprising part to any of us. Aaron had very significant atherosclerosis of his coronary arteries. For those who don't know what that is, because I didn't either, it's thickening of your arteries, the walls of your arteries, from a buildup of plaque. His left main artery had 85% blockage due to this buildup of plaque, and the LAD artery was 95% blocked. So suffice it to say, I've done a lot of research in the years since, and I'm not a doctor, and I'm not medically trained at all. So my research, is limited to the means I have at my disposal. But I mean, there's some undisputed facts out there. So heart disease is the leading cause of death, both in the U.S. and in the world. In the U.S., it's responsible for 1 out of every 4 deaths.
Wow.
There's also a misconception that heart disease only affects, old men who smoke and don't exercise.
Yeah, and have like unhealthy lifestyles. That's just the picture that you paint when you think of somebody who, is prone to heart attacks and cardiovascular disease.
And not to say that there's not some truth to that. Like, I mean, a lot of people who have heart attacks do fit that mold,
Right.
that criteria. But the truth is that a lot of young, fit, otherwise healthy men and women can also develop this level of plaque buildup in their arteries that can lead to these types of consequences.
Right.
There was actually a study done by the University of Sydney and Heart Research Australia that found that in the 8-year period between 2006 and 2014, the rate of healthy patients, so those are patients with no risk factors, having heart attacks increased from 11 to 27%.
Wow.
Another study from 2000 to 2016 showed that the proportion of very young people, which is people identified as in their 20s or 30s, having a heart attack has been increasing by 2% each year.
Every year.
Over the last 10 years of that study. One good thing is that the number of heart attacks in older at-risk patients is actually declining. So because those make up the greatest number of heart attacks, the overall number of heart attacks is declining.
Right.
Thanks to statins, the medicines that people typically take who are at high risk for heart attacks, and other advancements in medical care. But there's some data out there suggesting that more young people are getting are having this condition, and they're being left out by the typical risk factors.
Yeah, right.
Like your high cholesterol, your high blood pressure, being obese or being a smoker. Those are seen as having diabetes. Those are seen as some of the typical markers or risk factors of developing heart disease. And what seems clear is that we need better markers for heart disease. These high cholesterol, for instance, often seen as like one of the best indicators. I read that over half of people suffering heart attacks don't have high cholesterol.
Right. And I know that you got like some test results, or that you knew some of the test results of Aaron, like going into the Army when he had his physical and tests and things like that. Do you know about his cholesterol levels? Like, was that a marker that could have been seen?
I actually don't know. So we're, it's not the simplest thing to get information from the Army.
Yeah. Okay.
We're actually working on getting some of these, results, getting some of these records. So, I mean, it's something that we're interested in just because, we're curious what, I'm sure they did some tests. He had Army physical before he went in the Army. I don't know what sort of tests they did.
Yeah. But even if, now that you're saying this, even if high cholesterol wasn't in there.
Yeah, it's not a guaranteed,
Yeah.
He might not have had high cholesterol.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think we need better markers for heart disease. We can't rely on the pre-existing ones because people are having this disease without those risk factors.
Mm-hmm.
We need better guidance on what those risk factors are and who qualifies as at risk.
Right.
And what procedures are recommended for those people. Is it, do we need to look more at family history? Our family has a history of heart attacks. My grandfather, my mom's dad, died of a heart attack. I think he was 59 years old.
Yeah, so he was young too.
Yeah. My dad's dad had a heart attack also in his 50s, I believe. He survived that heart attack, and lived for another 20 some odd years, but maybe these things need to be paid closer attention to when deciding what tests people should have.
Right. And you guys are fortunate also to know your family history and know that that is in your family history. There are some people that don't know that cardiovascular disease runs in their family. And, you know, it'd be nice to also maybe there's a way to find that out if you don't know, if you're adopted, if you're estranged from your family, like to be able to still, like you still have a right to your, you know, health care needs, and it'd be really nice, you know, to have that.
Yeah. You know, and if this means that more people need to be getting stress tests, or CT scans or MRIs of the heart, you know, let's do those things.
Right.
You know, I think there's a balance, right? Like our healthcare system can't support everybody getting all of the tests, right? But you know, there seems to be something lacking right now. If people can be thought of as like just the, you know, I would have never guessed that somebody could be, you know, have those levels of blockages in their arteries and be performing at the level that Aaron was, and had gone through the necessary tests. You know, it just seems like a test. There should have been a test performed that would have caught something like that.
Something, yeah.
You know, we need to make these things less expensive, more convenient. We have the technology, you know, we have a lot of the technology that we need. We need more advancements in technology. So why are we talking about this on this podcast? Well, I mean, it's my brother.
You could do whatever you want.
Yeah. It's our podcast.
It's my show.
But also, you know, we hope this discussion can shed some light on this topic. Maybe it can help someone who hears this podcast in some way, small or large. And, you know, we talk about startups on this podcast, and startups are about solving problems. Ideally big problems. The best startups solve big problems. Most startups focus on problems of a lot less significance than the number one killer of humans in the world.
That's so true.
We need to get more intelligent people who are interested in or have experience in medicine or biology, focused on these sorts of big problems in the private sector. You know, more doctors, more nurses, more med school grads, go into startups. You know, we need more funding for these sorts of things. There's funding out there, but like I mean, it's the number one killer of Americans and of humans worldwide. You know, as healthcare providers, you have an impact on the people whose lives that you touch, but as somebody who creates a startup focused on these things, you can have an impact on millions of people's lives.
Absolutely.
Billions of people's lives.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is not to downplay our healthcare professionals and what they're doing. Some people, you know, they're great at those jobs, and they should continue doing those things. But I enjoy seeing when people leave those sorts of roles and found startups trying to tackle these very large problems selfishly, and also for the greater good. For anybody who's curious, I have had these tests done now. So when you have somebody this close to you biologically and genetically who has these sorts of issues, doctors tend to recommend that you get yourself checked out. But there's still no healthcare guidance really for being high risk now. Like, you know, there's nothing that says, oh, if, you know, your twin brother had this, so like, yeah, you should be covered for like these tests. Like, right. I still showed up at these offices for these. So I had a heart CT scan, I had a stress test, I had all sorts of blood work. I don't even remember all the tests I had. I had every test that they could think of to throw at me, and everything came back normal. But every time I went into any one of these places, I was the only person in my 30s there.
Yeah.
I was the only person under 60 probably there. I got some funny looks from the other patients, and even the providers. They were like, "What are you doing here?" Which, probably needs to change. If
the stigma of you being a young person needing these tests, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, and just young people in general. Like, I think a lot of people would look at this as a tragedy, which it is, but it's not just a tragedy of like these things happen, right? Like,
Right.
oh, it's 1 in a million or something like that.
Right.
Like, this is a preventable occurrence.
Yeah.
We have the technology to detect these sorts of things if we apply it to the right population, and the challenge is figuring out what that population is. I mean, what we don't have is the technology to apply it broadly enough that everybody can get it.
Right. Like the accessibility of people, like everyone being able to have it.
Right.
Is not there.
Which we have for other things, right? Like we have for, testing for other diseases and things like that, blood tests and different things like that. And there are some startups working on, there's some proteins out there that are maybe thought to be markers for plaque buildup. And so I read about a startup that's doing research on that topic. They still have a long way to go, I think, but things can be done here. Like, more can be done, and I'm excited to see where this goes. And we can't just rely on government and grants and universities to do research on this sort of stuff, because it's not enough. Like, those organizations don't move fast enough. Startups are where the innovation happens most often, and and it's not to say that there aren't any out there doing this, but
right. There's opportunity out there, and if you're looking to do a startup and you just don't really know like what a good cause is, like, think about this one. You know?
And not, it's not for everyone. I'm saying specifically people who are interested in the medical field, in the biosciences. Yeah, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you I know it's been 5 years since this all happened. And they say, like, when you grieve, it never gets easier. It just becomes part of who you are. And I just wanted to thank you for always being able to share your brother's story and share who he was in your life, because he obviously means so much to so many people. He means a lot to me. I've known him for almost half my life too. And I don't think, really important people are never forgotten. And I know this is probably always hard to talk about, but I really admire your courage. So thank you for doing that.
This is the point where I usually ask you to subscribe to our podcast, but I'm going to ask you for a different favor today. Please share this episode. Share it on social media. Share it with a friend or family member. Statistics are one thing, but personal stories, especially in support of statistics, are often more powerful. We hope that sharing Aaron's story will have a positive impact on the lives of others. Thank you.
Okay. I think we needed that break.
Yeah, I know I did.
Okay, we got our Kleenexes. We're good. All right. On to our next segment.
Yes.
All right.
Please.
Vetrapreneurship.
Did you coin this term?
No. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term, or if you know what that means.
I know what it means, but I don't
do?
think I've ever heard anybody use it.
Oh, well, it's the first time I heard about it when I was researching this topic, but apparently vetrapreneurship
It's a hard word to say.
Apparently, vetrapreneurship has been sweeping the country. Small Business Administration reports that 25% of post 9/11 veterans want to start their own businesses. So veterans have been making a name for themselves in successful business launches for decades, with skills that you learn in the military, like quick decision making under pressure, organization skills, leadership. It really translates very well in big business ventures and, the boardroom, right? So, there's lots of large successful companies like Remax, Sperry Shoes, FedEx, Walmart, and even GoDaddy. These were all started by military veterans. Did you know any of those?
No, I didn't know that any of those were started by military veterans.
And it just goes to show you can grow in any industry. So these companies, they range from real estate to fashion to tech and retail. So, veterans, they have the capacity to really do anything. And so a couple years ago, Forbes put out a list of the top 25 veteran-founded startups in America. They took a lot of statistics in play to generate this list. They looked at prior 12-month revenues, 2-year growth rate, and employee headcount and external capital raised, and then they ranked them based on those factors. So since Veterans Day is just around the corner, and in honor of my brother-in-law, your twin, who proudly served, we wanted to highlight 3 of the top companies still in existence that are veteran-owned startups. What do you think?
Of course.
All right. So the first one I want to talk about is called Pigeonly. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I have not.
Okay. It's spelled like pigeon, the bird, with an L-Y. So it offers reliable inmate communication services, including phone calls, photos, and mail to stay connected to your loved ones in prison easily and affordably.
Cool.
Yeah. Isn't that like... And so, yeah, these are going to be 3 startups that you would have never thought of the industry.
No, this is not a problem that I'm too familiar with, but I can understand the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's based in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Pigeonly was founded by Frederick Hudson, who served in the U.S. Air Force as an electrical environmental specialist and was released from federal prison in 2012. I looked up what he did. I don't know if you're interested in that.
Yeah. What did he do?
So while he was one of his early jobs was window tinting, and it wasn't bringing in a lot of money. So it kind of, and this was actually in Florida. Now that I think about it, I think Sarasota.
Okay.
And it turned into a marijuana delivery service. Which,
That was his pivot?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Well,
I don't encourage those sorts of pivots.
No,
but,
definitely not. So he went to prison. And he, but when he got out of prison, he realized that there was a need, right? And it was a cost-effective way to get in touch with your loved ones. Because I don't know what the story was, but apparently it was hard for him to do that. But he pitched it. It was actually a YC company.
Wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And it started as Photo Pigeon. And so it was an easier way for friends and family to share photos with incarcerated from their mobile devices. But now it's a platform that makes it easy for friends and families to search over 4,000 facilities nationwide to find their incarcerated loved one and communicate them. And it's not just through photos anymore. It's photos, greeting cards, and so much more right from your own personal device. So they say that it cuts the cost of expensive prison calls by 80%.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were named one of Time Magazine's most influential companies in 2022.
Awesome.
So talk about a big turnaround for Frederick Hudson. But that's a way to turn your skills and seeing a need and making it something successul. So.
Yeah. I mean, one of the big things for finding a startup that you want to work on is understanding the problem, a problem. And oftentimes the best places to look for problems are places that most people don't think of. So I wouldn't advise anybody to get arrested so that they can go to prison and understand what prison life is like. But as a fortunate side effect of this experience, that's a great story.
Right. And their website, I'm just going to share all the websites, is pigeonly.com.
Cool.
If you ever want to look at that. So the second company is called Combat Flip Flops. Have you ever heard of them?
I think I might have heard of them. That sounds more familiar to me.
Okay, and I'm probably sure I know how you have, but Combat Flip-Flops, they deliver fashion and lifestyle products from combat areas to empower local entrepreneurs, rebuild struggling nations, and fund women's education in Afghanistan.
Wow.
All along the way. So they are based in Issaquah, Washington. And Combat Flip-Flops was founded by Donald Lee and Matthew Griffin. So they both served as Army Rangers during the war in Afghanistan. And while they were on tour, they witnessed just how much people were suffering in war-torn countries. So when they came back, they were inspired to make a positive difference with peaceful, sustainable business. And they started employing families in dangerous places, including Afghanistan, Laos, Colombia, and more. And it started as making flip-flops from combat boot soles. So they wanted to give families the opportunity to support themselves, without having to like join extremist groups or really putting themselves in danger. And then likewise, the company also donated to help send Afghan girls to school. So this was back in 2012, but Combat Flip-Flops is probably best known, and this is probably where you had heard about them, from their appearance in Shark Tank in 2022.
Yeah, I probably saw them on there.
Yeah, so their ask on Shark Tank was $150,000 for 10% equity, and they ended up getting an investment from Damon, Lori, and Mark Cuban for $300,000 for 30% equity. So then after the episode aired, Combat Flip-Flops revenue increased by 600%. Go figure. That's a lot of exposure.
Yeah, that often happens. The Shark Tank effect.
And then since then, they've sent more Afghan women to school and helped clear landmines from farmable land. So, which is really cool. Their annual revenue is about $4.6 million, and you can still purchase Combat Flip-Flops and other types of shoes. They do a lot more than just flip-flops now, and they can be purchased on either Amazon or their official website. So they have quite the reach. And their website is combatflipflops.com.
Yeah, that's an awesome story.
Yeah. And then the third one to highlight is called Goodworld. And I know that's going to be a tongue twister for me. I can't even say entrepreneur. So Goodworld. Have you heard of them?
No, never heard of Goodworld.
Okay. I love how that just rolls off your tongue and I can't say it. Anyway, Goodworld is a finance tech company that makes giving simple, secure, and viral with hashtag-powered payments for good. So it's like a charitable contribution fintech company. Goodworld is based in Washington, D.C., and it was founded by John Gossert, and he served in the U.S. Army Armor. And also, fun fact, I just found out, I Googled him, and he's an adjunct professor at Georgetown University, too. So,
go Hoyas. Okay.
And he founded it along with his co-founder. Her name is Dale Nirvani Pfeiffer in 2015. Goodworld, it helps nonprofits with any and every aspect of their fundraising needs, whether it be, grassroots campaigns, event giving, text engagement. Goodworld has the technology to enhance and simplify that experience. But it started, and I thought it was kind of cool, it started by the creation of hashtag donate. So it was a way for anyone on social media to comment and instantly give to causes that they care about by typing hashtag donate 50, and it automatically gives $50 to, whatever the influencer posts about what they're supporting. So it made it really, possible for businesses, influencers, and others to add a charitable component to any online experience. Facebook, X, TikTok, I don't know, whatever the other ones are. Instagram.
Awesome. Maybe Threads.
Yeah, Threads. Sure. So Goodworld was named one of Fast Company's most innovative companies. And in 2016, it was DC's best technology startup. So their website is goodworldnow.com.
That's a cool story. These are 3 great startups. Thanks for sharing them with us.
Absolutely. Go veterans, and happy Veterans Day. And thank you to all who served. Okay. I have a huge ask to put out there for this next segment. Okay?
Okay. Are you asking me?
You, our listeners, everyone and their mother.
All right, I'm in.
Okay, so let's get into it. It's time for our Hot Mom of the Week.
Yeah, whoa, last time I checked, I'm still hot, real hot.
All right, so if there's anything to take away from what we talked about today, I want to say like one of the big things was the importance of heart health, right? And the awareness to know when something's just maybe like not right, right? That was like, something.
Yeah,
that kind of-
definitely.
yeah. So thinking about who to feature for our Hot Mom of the Week, I immediately went to the American Heart Association site because they have this whole campaign called Go Red for Women. Are you familiar with that, or have you heard of it?
I don't think so.
It's the American Heart Association's signature women's initiative addressing the awareness and clinical care gaps of the number one killer of women, which is cardiovascular disease. We talked about, CVD as the number one killer for all Americans. So Go Red for Women spotlights stories of women survivors that talk about heart health journeys, and they raise awareness about stroke and heart attacks. But as I was reading through, looking for someone to spotlight, I noticed that none of the women really had a big social media following. And there was even this former athlete who was part of this year's class, and she had maybe a couple thousand followers. So I find this kind of crazy because these are women, right, whose stories need to be amplified in order to raise awareness on, this really important issue. So preventative measures, either from those suffering from a heart attack or from bystanders needing to assist or perform CPR, they won't be educated on what to do and what to look for without the content being out there. So I'm going to highlight this week's Hot Mom of the Week, who only has about 1,000 followers on Instagram, with a call to action to all of our listeners. Follow her. Follow any of the women on the Go Red for Women 2023 class. Hear their stories. Understand the impact that her content and all of these women, their content, can have on people who suffer from cardiovascular disease. So her name is Melanie Wickersheim. She underwent 3 heart transplant surgeries, and she talks about symptoms she experienced that were misinterpreted at the time to be something else other than cardiovascular issues. She advocates for greater awareness of how heart attack symptoms can differ in women so that more women can recognize what's happening to their bodies if something should go wrong.
She had 3 heart transplants?
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to go through the story real quick on what that was about. So she had her first one when she was just a baby, so she doesn't even remember that one. There on her social media, she doesn't even count that as one. So she's had 2. But she had a condition when she was a baby called pediatric myocarditis. And so that's an inflammation of the muscular walls of the heart. That was fixed. She was good. And she, lived a childhood. She was 10 years old when suddenly she stopped being able to hold down food. So that was a symptom that a lot of people don't recognize could be like a heart health issue. She felt so weak when she was walking that she could barely walk across a parking lot without having to stop at every light pole and take a breath, and she was panting for air. But her doctor said it was the flu. So it wasn't until her mom, who was a nurse, had looked down and she realized that Melanie's legs and feet were extremely swollen, which is a sign of heart failure.
Wow.
So she underwent her second heart transplant after nearly dying at 10 years old. Going into her teen years, Melanie developed anxiety and depression, and she was prone to a lot of panic attacks. So she grew up learning to control them. Ultimately, she became an adult. She found love. She got married. And she had a daughter, and she had a daughter through a surrogate. So she was even preventative about, any heart health issues that could happen while you're pregnant. She was very mindful of all this. 1 year after having her daughter, her whole family, they were on vacation, and she started feeling some mild chest pain, but she just assumed it was another panic attack. But this time she also had really bad back pain along with her chest pain. But she just attributed that to sleeping funny while she was on vacation. So 4 days later, though, a cold flash kind of just like engulfed her whole body, followed by severe abdominal pains, and she realized she was having a heart attack.
Wow.
After a period of being incredibly sick, Melanie finally underwent her third heart transplant. And, you know, fast forward, she's had no rejection issues for more than a year. And so reaching that milestone for transplant recipients is kind of huge. Like usually an organ experiences rejection within the first 12 months.
If it's going to. Okay.
Yeah. So now she's 38 years old. She's living in Minneapolis, and she's really making the most of her new life. She also took a CPR class so that she's prepared to save a life if she was around someone who goes into cardiac arrest. So she approaches life, you know, more optimistically, and she hopes that she can spread awareness of what symptoms look like when you're having a heart attack. So follow Melanie on Instagram. Her handle is @openheartmel.
Great handle.
Yes. And she posts, she's such an advocate of heart health. She posts all the time about her personal story, how lucky she is, and also a lot of awareness posts when it comes to heart health. So follow her, as well as the American Heart Association. They post a lot of content about things to look for, things to know about, statistics about heart health that are just really important to keep in the back of your mind as you're living your life. So learn more about heart health, signs to be aware of, and preventative practices.
Well, that's all we've got today. If you enjoyed the episode, hit the subscribe button.
And reach out on social media.
.coms
And Hot Moms.
signing off.